From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is Road Signs. Here is your host, Seth Clevenger.
Thank you for listening to Road Signs, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going to focus on one of the biggest problems that professional truck drivers encounter on a daily basis: finding a safe and convenient place to park. In fact, an annual survey by the American Transportation Research Institute found that truck parking was the number one industry concern for commercial drivers last year. But how can drivers, fleet operators, and other industry stakeholders take steps to alleviate this persistent challenge? We'll set out to answer that question in this episode. But before we begin, I'd like to invite you to keep up to date on this issue and other important industry topics by subscribing to Transport Topics at ttn.ws/TT subscribe. You can also text TT subscribe to 571-622-0001. And now, to learn more about the truck parking problem and potential solutions, I'm excited to welcome Evan Shelley, co-founder and CEO of truckparkingclub.com. Thanks for joining us, Evan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm glad to have you on the podcast here to talk about truck parking, which, as we all know, has become a major headache for truck drivers and also a severe challenge for the trucking industry at large. Just to begin the conversation, tell us a little bit about your startup company, truckparkingclub.com. How does it work and how can drivers utilize it?
Yeah, so Truck Parking Club is a platform, a two-sided marketplace where we connect truckers to truck parking owners, whether that be actually truck parking operators, whether that be trucking companies that have excess space in their facility. It could be, a myriad of different type of truck parking locations. We connect those two. We facilitate that connection and that transaction on our platform. And what we do is we create reservable truck parking locations in real time.
So really, it's sort of like an Airbnb model on some level, right? Where you're you're connecting people who need truck parking with those who have the excess space, right?
Exactly. We think that there is excess capacity of truck parking out there that's not being utilized, and what our mission is to help bring awareness to that extra capacity.
Sure. And you gave some examples of the types of property owners, landowners that you're working with. Whether these are vacant or underused parking lots, underutilized properties. Could be trucking companies own terminals that they're not fully utilizing. And you're adding these types of properties to your parking network, but maybe give some other examples of just sort of the variety of different types of locations that you have as part of the network.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're getting some more unique type things where we have self-storage owners with some excess capacity. We have people that'll have, a quarter acre lot that they had remaining from a previous development that's just sitting there. That's zoned properly, fortunately, that they're looking to put on the platform. Um, you know, Even we are getting people that maybe are in more rural type areas, but they know that they see trucks going down their highway all the time, and they think that with their excess capacity, why not put it on the platform and give truckers an opportunity to book there and help monetize their space at the same time. So we're seeing a lot of different types of property owners looking to monetize their properties.
And speaking of that, could you take us through the process of incentivizing property owners to do this, to join the parking network, and make their spaces available? Clearly there has to be some benefit for them for opening up their locations for truck parking, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think we're seeing the most value for the property owners that are, in some form or fashion around commercial or industrial type vehicles, where they have some type of experience in the industry, maybe not directly with tractor trailers, and they also have land available. We're seeing that if they have that half acre or even several acres that's just sitting there at the moment because we're a no commitments, no leases platform, and maybe they think they're going to have that capacity for 6 months or whatever the case may be. Um, it makes a lot of sense for them to do that rather than they can't go out and lease it to an industrial operator typically for that period of time. So why not go onto a platform where there's no commitments, no leases, and really make the best of it and monetize that land while maybe you're looking to do something else with it, or maybe it ends up being a great fit and really the incentive is you're making money when the property was not making any income.
Yeah, for sure. And on the other side, are you finding that drivers are willing to pay to reserve a space? Obviously, this is a big pain point in the industry, right? I mean, drivers, lose a lot of time and productivity trying to find spaces, but how willing are they, to pay for parking? And how do you find the right price for a given location or market?
Yeah, truckers are willing to pay for locations that are convenient for them. And I would just elaborate on that. In a lot of situations, we're saving them time. And if they can plan out their routes with our reservable truck parking locations and have the surety that that parking spot's going to be there and time it well with, with their ELD, then it can make a lot of sense. Even though it isn't as convenient as a rest stop, where it's entirely free, we give surety to a trucker. And what we're also seeing is we're getting a lot of bookings for trailers that need to sit for a few days. They're in between loads for whatever the case may be. And we're providing them that surety that they're going to have the ability to reserve parking for a few days and leave their trailer.
And I'll say that speaking for myself, I'm paying $20 a day to park in my office in Washington D.C. So with my passenger car, right? So I know that I'm willing to pay to park for the convenience, rather than spend a lot more time on the train to get in. So obviously much different use case, different vehicle type, but to your point, if you can save a lot of time, in your available hours of service and maximize your time and your productivity and make more, um, as a driver, typically paid by the mile, then, that can very quickly pay for itself. But I want to maybe take me back to the beginning. How did you get the idea to start this business, Evan? And how and when did you realize that this truck parking issue is such a big problem for truck drivers?
Yeah, so my background is real estate, commercial industrial real estate. And this all started to, become clear to me that there was an issue back in 2021 when I was doing a real estate deal in Florida and the municipality. I was looking at a piece of property. I had it under contract. I was looking to develop it for truck parking because the use case that I originally wanted wasn't going to work and it was zoned industrial. So I said, well, truck parking, this is an obvious play. It's a great location for it. And the municipality said, no, truck parking is not going to be permitted here. And you can try, but we're telling you we're not going to approve it. And I was just like, it's zoned industrial. How can you not approve it? And so that got me thinking and understanding. And the more I talked with people, the more I understood that there was a truck parking shortage. There was this huge demand for it. And I really originally looked at it from a real estate investment perspective. And what I found was it just wasn't really I would say for me personally, I didn't see it as a super scalable business. So then I kept looking at it on, how do you get into this business and help with the shortage while also creating a business around it? And, eventually came to what we have today, which is truck parking club, and leveraging technology to bring awareness to available truck parking through a network of truck parking locations throughout the US.
Um, and you've been at this. I know it's a newer company, but you've been at this a while, and you've really been kind of digging into the issue of truck parking. So, from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest source of this truck parking problem? Is it a scarcity of available parking locations? Is it just not enough visibility to where locations are available? Is it some of both? What do you see as the primary problem to solve here?
Yeah, so the more I'm digging deeper and deeper into this business by talking with more and more truckers and more property owners and more truck parking operators, um, it is my opinion that we do have a truck parking shortage, but part of the issue as well is a shortage of truck parking awareness is a big part of it as well. If you know imagine a world where there's nothing out there to tell you in real time that how much truck parking is available within a 50-mile radius of you, and that's what truckers deal with every single day. Like, that's what they deal with. They don't know for a fact whether truck parking is available around them. There are various apps that may say, we think there is truck parking here, we think there's truck parking there, but there is no, hey, there's 8 spots available right now a mile down the road. Um, and that network needs to be accomplished. I mean, if anything, for truckers to have that awareness, because if a trucker doesn't know that there's parking a mile down the road, has no awareness, no way to understand that it's there, then they're gonna stop wherever they can find parking, and their lack of awareness has them parked on the shoulder of the interchange, whereas maybe there is a spot for them down the road, and they need that, the ability to go to a platform to know for a fact that there's a spot for them down the road.
Hello, roadside listeners. Dan Ronan here from Transport Topics. I'm here to tell you about our new extended cuts of the Road Signs podcast. If you like what you learn here, I think you're going to really love this. So, what is the Road Signs extended cut? Well, instead of ending the recording and saying our guest farewells, we're keeping our expert guests around for an extra 1 or 2 questions to gather a deeper, fuller picture of the influential topics in transportation. We capture that insight and convert it into a printable download that will help you navigate the latest trucking trends and guide your next business decision. Considering the easy, linkable, and printable format, you can keep the extended cut for your next big meeting, send it to your friends and colleagues, or pack it up for your next big conference. So how do you get the latest download? Well, it's real simple. Visit ttn.ws/extended cut. That's ttn.ws/extended cut.
Clearly is also a safety issue as well. And I do want to also talk a little bit more about, why, this truck parking issue has, some really, broader ramifications beyond just being, an annoyance for drivers. Of course, as we mentioned before, long haul truck drivers have a limited amount of driving time under federal hours of service rules. So, there are times, when drivers may stop early for the day, um, not because they're tired, but just because they're not sure if they can find safe parking if they keep going. There's a truck stop right here. Okay, I'm going to stop, even though I've got, may have a few hours left to go. And I would like to keep going, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to park if I do. And that, of course, means, if drivers aren't fully utilizing their available hours, they aren't making as much money, and the entire freight transportation network is less efficient. We talk a lot about, driver recruiting and retention, driver shortages, trucking companies having a really hard time, with driver turnover rates. So you really want drivers to be as productive as possible. And, of course, drivers waste time just looking for parking too. So, maybe I'd like to just hear your thoughts on why this truck parking issue is bigger than just an annoyance for drivers, but really is a big problem for the entire industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of spelled it out. If the trucker cannot find parking adequately, um, I mean, I always go back to this owner operator independent drivers association quote, which is essentially that I think there's one spot for every 11 drivers, and that's costing approximately $5,000 to $6,000 a year. I think that's essentially something like the quote. And ultimately, where is that cost being spread out, right? So that the truck driver is taking the brunt of that cost because they're the inefficiencies in the system. That inefficiency in the system is also resulting in that load getting there in a slower manner, and that load getting there in a slower manner is also costing the consumer. So and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but when you see these, you'll every once in a while you'll see on some local news or something that they've shut down an illegal truck parking facility, and the people on the news are like, essentially talking about the people that are running this illegal facility as if they're dealing drugs, and the truckers as if they're carrying drugs. And in reality, they're actually carrying the consumer's iPhone. And the fact that they just got reprimanded for parking at this facility, and the truck parking operator got reprimanded for running this facility, um, all those costs are actually affecting the very people that are running that news program, and essentially talking about these truckers and truck parking owners as if they're doing something wrong. So I think it's kind of quite the what is the word, an oxymoron, kind of, where they think that justice has been served, when in reality they're one of the bigger, the consumer is one of the bigger people impacted at the end of the day, because all those costs involved with that, they sometimes it's almost like a raid or something. All the costs involved with that all trickles down to the consumer. So the entire supply chain gets affected every time one of those news, one of those segments gets ran, and talking about truckers and truck parking owners as if they're bad people and they're doing something wrong. Ultimately, everyone down the supply chain suffers, including the consumer. So it's just quite, I don't know. I don't, I think people should be more, I think there should be something out there educating people on what is actually happening and why trucking is such an important part. What is it? 70-80% of all goods are moved by truck, right? So why aren't consumers? I mean, if consumers were aware of these things, they'd be like, "What? Okay, why aren't we doing anything for truckers?" Right? Like, why are we running news segments on truckers being parked in the wrong places and talking about them as if they're bad people? Like, it's just kind of bizarre to me.
Yeah, well, there's clearly the industry, the trucking industry is the circulatory system of the economy. So we're all very much dependent on the trucks moving and transporting the freight to their end destinations. But it does speak to the challenge, because it just and why you do see the trucks parked on off ramps and on the shoulders, and because sometimes it's they're out of hours, they're running out of hours, they can't find another option, and that is a problem with our that circulatory system, right? I mean, it's the flow of freight is important for all of us. But speaking of that, as you start to put together your network for parking, are there certain markets or certain locations where you really see some major pain points for the availability of parking? Kind of curious, as you build out your network, what you're seeing in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, there's always markets that need it um, worse than others, and I mean, I think the port cities are typically kind of the epicenter of just not having enough. We're talking Port of LA, Houston, Savannah. That's I mean, most of the need can typically be contributed back to a port, but also not always. I mean, there's various parts of the southeast here that are can at certain times be in pretty dire need. Um, so that's kind of my thought on you know the certain areas that are hit a little bit harder.
Okay. And all while I'm at it, I also want to ask you, what's next for Truck Parking Club? Maybe give me an update on, the build out on the network. I'm sure you're working to expand that. Which geographic regions are you in now, and how, what are the plans for expansion moving forward? And also, are you planning to add any new features or functionalities to the site?
Yeah, so we're moving. We're almost getting a listing every single day, a new listing somewhere in the U.S. I mean, here in the last few days, we've gotten Savannah, we've gotten just outside of Indianapolis, Raleigh, North Carolina, Orangeburg, South Carolina, Ontario, California. So we're expanding pretty quickly, and we're trying to accomplish the mission of creating that network where we can be a platform that truckers know they can look in real time and find available truck parking for them and reserve that truck parking. And the goal, really is to achieve that is to on every major interstate have readily, reservable truck parking. We can't guarantee we're always going to have truck parking available, but we want the ability for truckers to use our platform wherever they're at in the U.S. to see what's going on and see what's available, and you know, um, really help with that awareness that I mentioned earlier. Um, and then I would say, what are we um, working on implementing, going forward? We're really staying focused on building out the network, but also, there are a few features that we will ultimately implement, like routing will be one of those things that we will implement in the near future. We will also, at some point in the future, implement subscription programs to help with giving truckers readily available parking and guaranteeing that they have a space available through Truck Parking Club by being part of the subscription platform. Um, and then there's a couple other things I can't really get too deep into, but maybe you and I can swing back around when it happens, and we can talk about it. But I would just say, I'll say this: we're not always just going to be a paid for parking platform. We're not going to always just have paid parking on our platform. We're going to have other options, and it's still going to show availability and reservability.
No, I appreciate that guidance, and it's be interesting to watch how the platform develops. But before I let you go, Evan, I always like to end on a kind of a crystal ball question. So I'd like you to maybe look forward 10 years from now. Do you anticipate that it'll be easier for truck drivers in a decade to find safe and convenient parking, or is this going to continue to be this major pain point for the industry? Especially when you consider that the economy is going to grow over time, freight volumes are going to continue to grow, and so what's your best sense of it? I mean, do you see this improving, or is it just something that we're probably still going to be talking about 10 years from now?
I think if technology is implemented properly over the next 10 years and really handling the awareness that we've talked about and bringing a ton of awareness to available parking, and that on top of developing at the rates that we're seeing truck parking developed at, I think that things could be a lot more manageable 10 years from now. Are they going to be perfect? I don't know. But I do think bringing truck parking up to date with available technologies can do a lot for truckers.
Well, I hope you're right, and I think that all our listeners will agree, and also hope that you are correct on that front. Hey, I've enjoyed this conversation, Evan, but I think we've reached a pretty good stopping point here. So, I just want to say thanks again for joining the podcast and sharing your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original question. How can truck drivers and the industry as a whole help address the scarcity of truck parking? As we've heard during this episode, drivers and fleet operators lose a lot of time and productivity while searching for available parking, or simply stopping early for the day due to uncertainty about when and where they'll be able to park next. One potential solution to this problem is providing drivers with greater visibility on available parking locations and enabling them to reserve parking in advance so they can better plan their days and make better use of their available hours of service. That not only makes life easier for drivers, but also helps make the entire freight transportation network more efficient. If you've enjoyed this episode of Road Signs, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with me and the Road Signs team. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. Also, let us know how we did by texting TT Survey to 571-622-0001. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a fresh episode of Road Signs. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.